This takes us to our next section this week, Chapter 33, Section 2, Communists Take Power in China. Again, we have three objectives. Analyze the civil war between the nationalists and the communists. Explain how China split into two nations, and also describe how Mao's Marxist regime transformed China. So now we're seeing that the communists, between the battle of the nationalists and the communists, we see the communists end up winning. So during World War II, we have the two parties, nationalists and communists, coming together to make sure they kick Japan out. To be clear, Mao is the leader of the Chinese communists against Japanese invaders, and Jiang Jiechi, or Chiang Kai-shek, is known as the leader of the Chinese nationalists in World War II. But as soon as World War II ends, the nationalists and the communists, they are fighting each other again. So these two leaders go back to fighting each other. Jiang, he receives 1.5 billion in aid to fight the Japanese. However, these supplies and money often end up in the hands of a few corrupt officers. So if you remember what we learned in the last chapter, Jiang's democratic government is a very corrupt democratic government. So a lot of people are being paid off, a lot of money is passing hands it should not be passing. Here's sort of an easy way to look at a chart. So we have the leader, Mao, versus Jiang Jiechi. We have areas ruled. Mao is in northern China, Jiang is in southern. Foreign support, Soviet Union is supporting Mao, whereas the States is supporting Jiang. Domestic policy, national liberation versus defeat of communists. Public support, inflation and failing economy, while as Mao had a strong peasant following. What I'd like you to do, this is your first question, drawing conclusions. Which party's domestic policy might appeal more to Chinese peasants? So you can put this in a graph if you would like. Also, which aspect of the communist approach do you think was the most responsible for Mao's victory? So looking at all these different things, what is the most responsible for why Mao ends up being the leader? So looking at the communists versus the nationalists, we see that the nationalists outnumber the communists 3-1. That means the nationalists, their army is huge compared to the communist army. The other thing is that we have a lot of money being given to the nationalists as well. This money is probably being given by countries who want to keep democracy, so countries like Britain and the US. The other thing is that the nationalists, they're very corrupt though, and the people do not support the nationalists. Many of the people themselves, they're supporting the communists. The economic problems start to arise and cause many of these nationalist soldiers, they end up deserting the nationalists and going to join the communist army. So we have, because of economic problems, we have nationalist soldiers leaving. The last thing is Mao, he actually promises land reform. What that means is that he is promising peasants to take back land from rich landowners and redistribute it to everyone. This also allows Mao to gain popularity with the people. At last, the communists' key is they're going to capture the cities. This ends up being quite an easy thing to do, as many of these nationalist soldiers have already sort of deserted the Nationalist Party for communism. The other thing is that many people, because they're very excited about the possibility of owning their own land, with the land reforms Mao is promising, the cities are sort of easy to take over. Everyone already sort of supports Mao. So in 1949, the People's Republic of China is created. We have a communism has been established. And many of these nationalists, they end up going to, yes, they go to Taiwan. And that is what we see today still. Here is Mao sort of taking to the mic in this picture, after he has sort of defeated the nationalists and kicked out the nationalists. Of course, when Mao ends up kicking out the nationalists, we do have a reaction from the rest of the world. The US, they're supporting the nationalist state of Taiwan, and they set up what we call as the Republic of China. So the US is striving to make sure that Taiwan is a democratic country, whereas the Soviets, they are supporting China. They also have formed an alliance to agree that if any attacks happen, they will support each other through that as well. The US tries to stop the Soviet expansion and the spread of communism in Asia. Now, this is not always the most successful, as we will see. China ends up taking control of Tibet, and the southern part of Mongolia. Because in Tibet, we have sort of a very religious area in Tibet here. And the leader of Tibet is the Dalai Lama. After China sort of tightened its grips in the 1950s in the Tibet area, we have the Dalai Lama. He starts to flee to India. And India welcomes many different refugees from Tibet. India and China, they end up clashing over a border. So they're clashing over sort of this border area right near Tibet. And even though it never escalated into any sort of war, we still have tensions remain in that area today. Communists transform China. Mao starts to make a more tight control over the communism in China. And he calls this his mandate of heaven. So Chinese communists are organizing a national government and a communist party. Mao also is trying to sort of solidify his brand of Marxist socialism. Mao at first takes back lots of the property from landowners in the rural area of China. Now, the landowners in China, they are quite rich and they own quite a bit of the land. So only 1% of the population in rural China owns a majority of the land. Mao takes that land back and he just redistributes the land to peasants. Eventually what he ends up doing is he starts to form collective farms. Now we've talked about collective farms before when we've looked at Russia. This is sort of the idea of command economy. The government also seizes private companies and the plans of production increase. So they're making all these private companies owned by the government, and the government is going to set certain quotas on what to make. This mostly is with natural resources such as coal, cement, steel, and electricity. These are the types of things that China is sort of taking their natural resources and making into products. And by 1957, we do see a dramatic increase in China. This comes to a next part of what Mao was trying to do in China. It's called the Great Leap Forward, and this is the idea of communes. Now, communes were large collective farms. So you would have huge, vast farms that would support over 25,000 people. And the idea is that peasants would be working the farm together. They would be eating together. They'd be living in almost like a dorm together. That means no one owned any land, no one owned any food, everyone was sharing together. The problem is, this presents a huge problem as many crop failures lead to famine in China. By 1961, almost 4 years after it started, this program ends. And it also ends with about 20 million people dying from starvation or from other causes. Here's some of the propaganda that was shown during this time of the Great Leap Forward. So here we have it sort of farmland, and it looks like everyone's sort of getting along in perfect harmony. Some more propaganda. And here we have is the reality of these collective farms. Many people are sort of starting to rebel. This is the commune area, Okay, they almost ate in sort of a cafeteria-like place. And here we start to see some of the starvation that's happening on these farms. So it's quite gruesome. So not only has Mao now had his first sort of failing project, the Great Leap Forward, but China and Soviet Union are not getting along as well as they were in before. Part of that, if we can remember, Stalin is in leadership right now. And part of that is that they are both huge countries that share a large territorial line. China and Russia are right next to each other, and they're both sort of trying to do what's best for their country while still promoting communism, and that's going to cause some conflict. The Great Leap Forward that also caused Mao to lose some power. So he is, after over 20 million people die, he's not as popular of a leader as he was beforehand. He's forced to sort of step down from some of this policy making in the government. And he's losing political power to more moderate leaders, leaders who may have some ideas of communism, but will still open up so that farmers can have their own land and there can be small business. But Mao's role in government was reduced. But what he ends up doing is he sort of calls out to all young people to sort of stand up in the name of this social unity and equality that is communism. And that's how the Red Guards form. So we have many students and young people, they leave school and they form a Red Guard militia or army that will enforce communism in China. So for a second, it looks like China is going to sort of be more of a socialist, open-ended communism with small-scale business. But Mao refuses. He says, no, we are now going to have an army that is going to control communism and make sure everyone is uniform and together. This leads to another revolution called the Cultural Revolution. Those Red Guards who are sort of taking a stand for strict communism in China, they're the ones who lead this Cultural Revolution. It is the belief that society is going to be built on peasants and workers, not on the educated elite. So the Red Guards, they are targeting schools and universities, and they'll imprison anyone who they think is an intellectual or someone who is educated. In 1968, the Chinese army imprisons and executes or exiles most of the Red Guards. So the people who started this revolution, they end up being executed about 15 years later. Now, many of you may ask, why would Mao order for the Red Guards to be shut down? But the reason is they had created sort of a chaos in China. So many of these farms, many society as we know it, just couldn't function with these Red Guards causing a huge problem. So Mao, who actually started and encouraged this at first, he's the one who rallies the Red Guards up and wants to execute them. Just to get an idea, here's some images from the Cultural Revolution. So right now they're destroying books, they're destroying anything that is linked to education. We also see here we have many religious and Buddhist statues are being burnt. Cultural Revolution was very against religion. Here we have some indoctrination. We have Mao standing there as a great leader, and many young students are reading about his importance. Some more propaganda. Just so you get an idea what's happening during the Cultural Revolution.